Well, good evening. I'm Alan Jackson, and welcome to Nashville. And welcome to a tale of two different sides of the new Trump era. On the one side, the Trump train is speeding ahead. On the other, there's a wayward group of Democrats and their liberal media echo chamber. By the numbers, the president has the majority of America on his side. On cutting government spending, on strengthening our military, on bringing peace to the Middle East and Ukraine, on not paying to turn boys into girls, or closing the border and evicting the criminals. We could go on, and we will tonight, because this may end up being the most significant government turnaround in our lifetime. So we want to go through some of these issues with someone who has seen the good years and the bad. With us tonight, the former editor of The Hill, Bob Cusack. Welcome back, Bob.
Hey, Alan, thanks for having me on.
Well, it's hard to know where to start, but I find so much of it is both fascinating and largely effective. Take the Trump-Elon Musk idea of first offering buyouts to reduce the size of the government, and then firing staff who are no longer needed, and now insisting that employees who are still there actually write down the 5 things they did most recently. It's become quite a battle, yet it seems like a pretty good idea to me. Do you agree?
It has definitely upended Washington. There's no doubt about it. I mean, even starting with the order that you have to actually come to work, because obviously COVID has been over for quite some time. It has really upset the Washington establishment, but that's what Trump and Musk do, and they're going to continue to do that. Obviously, now Musk has got to work with his cabinet. Well, not his cabinet, it's Trump's cabinet, but with government agency leaders now that they have mostly been confirmed. But without a doubt, I think it is something that Trump ran on, and it is really upsetting the establishment, more so, I think, than the beginning of his first term.
Wow. Well, there have been so many stories about millions of government workers sitting in the office doing nothing, or working from home and not really working much at all. Do you have any idea what percentage of government workers have been mostly unproductive over these past few years?
You know, it's hard to put a percentage on it. There's no doubt about it that government has gotten so much bigger. Remember, it was Bill Clinton that said the era of big government is over. And since then, even though he did try to reduce it somewhat, but not to this degree, government has exploded. And if you look at the Washington, D.C. area and its counties surrounding it, they're among the richest in the country. And a lot of that, obviously, Alan, has to do with government money and government contracts. So I think it's very hard to make the argument that government isn't bloated. Now, Democrats and others and some Republicans on the Hill are nervous of how Trump and Musk are doing it. But most agree that the government has to be reduced.
Well, we've spoken to a number of government employees, and most of them are just confused. Cabinet officers have been approved, but the staff reports to new appointees, and none of them are all in place yet. So they're waiting for some direction. What are you hearing?
Yeah, I know a number of government officials who are kind of unsure what to do, whether to respond to Musk, and their agencies say don't respond to him. So, you know, there's some growing pains here. There's no doubt about it. But at the same time, that's what Trump wants. As he said publicly, he wants Musk to be very aggressive, and Musk is being very aggressive.
Well, I think we all understand that cuts have to be made, but the examples we're hearing are shocking. And our payments on the debt are the same size as what we spend to keep our military active. Listen to how the White House spokesperson has put it.
The most important people are the American people, and 77% of Americans at home support a full investigation into the waste, fraud, and abuse that the federal government has been spending their tax dollars on. So that's the people the president cares about most, and that's why we're fulfilling this pledge. And again, it should come as no secret to anybody. The president campaigned on doing this.
It's really not a good situation, is it?
It's not, and the government waste has been going up and up over the years, and this president, even though other presidents talked about it, this president is vowing to crack down on it. Of course, one person's fraud is another person's just legitimate payment, so a lot of the special interests in Washington don't like cutting down their payments, which obviously a lot of it can be construed and labeled justly as waste. At the same time, Alan, you know, both the Congress and the president have to get serious about the debt, because even though they're reducing government employees, that $36 trillion debt level is out of control. It's gotten more out of control in the wake of COVID, and policymakers are going to have to deal with that at some point.
You know, to those of us outside the Beltway, we're accustomed to being a lot of words in Washington, D.C., but very little real action on this issue. Do the experts think that Musk and company will actually be able to find and cut $1 trillion?
You know, initially he had said 2 trillion. I think $1 trillion is actually more in line of what is possible, especially when you're talking about adding up the employees who have been let go and other ones that have been let go, but also going in and ending a number of programs that are not consistent with the Trump agenda. I think he can probably get to in the range of $1 trillion. I think it's going to be difficult beyond that. $1 trillion is a lot of money. And of course, Trump needs to raise money because he wants to extend his tax cuts of 2017. That's going to be costly. So he needs to not only come up with money from government efficiency standpoint, but from tariffs and other initiatives to pay for those tax cuts.
Are there any Democrats anywhere that are going to join this conversation about cutting spending?
I don't think so. We have a deadline coming up in March about the government shutdown deadline, and Democrats are saying they want some parameters whenever the deal is struck, and there will be some type of deal struck that restricts what the Department of Government Efficiency is doing. Republicans say that's a non-starter. So it's going to be interesting if Democrats say, well, if you don't give us some type of thing on what Musk is doing, or at least some type of ways to restrict him, we're going to shut down the government. I don't think they're going to do that, but they're threatening to in some ways.
Well, Trump, the deal maker, has floated another idea, this gold card citizenship, suggesting he could raise $1 trillion. Do you think that's going to fly?
You know, it's an interesting idea. I mean, Alan, as you know, he's a very creative guy. He's got a creative staff, and you know, whether it's Greenland or the Panama Canal, these are new ideas. This idea, this gold card, is a new one, but it is in line with past immigration reform that was bipartisan. George W. Bush tried to pass a comprehensive immigration package, but it fell short. But basically, one of the provisions back then was if you want to get into the country, or if you come into the country illegally, you've got to pay the government some type of fine. So it is a way to raise money, and Trump has to be and is in tune with that, especially when you're dealing with not only, as I mentioned, $36 trillion debt, but the deficit, which is the yearly cost, is approaching $2 trillion per year. So this is a problem one way or the other, whether it's deals with Ukraine or immigration related. The Treasury needs money.
Well, we'll be back with more from Bob Cusack in just a moment. Send us your thoughts about all this cutting and trimming and what you'd like to see happen. Send them to comments at alanjacksonnow.com. We'll be right back. We're back now with a Washington veteran, Bob Cusack. One of the very well-known Democratic operators is predicting that Elon Musk will give the Democrats a big reason to turn out the vote in the next election. James Carville may just be trying to get on the air with his predictions. What do you think about what he said?
Well, I think James Carville is very smart in some ways. He's noted that the Democratic Party has moved way left. It's a very different party now than it was when he worked for Bill Clinton and campaigned for Bill Clinton. At the same time, James Carville did predict that Harris was going to win, and she didn't win any battleground states. So listen, Democrats, they don't have a leader right now. They don't have an agenda. They're kind of lost. They're trying to pick up the pieces, and they're wondering kind of what the next step is going into not only the midterms, but specifically 2028. They've got to have a better messenger, because honestly, Harris and Biden were among the worst Democratic messengers I've seen at the top of the ticket in quite some time.
Well, a Democratic congressman claims that President Trump is moving in a fascist direction, but they're not offering any ideas of their own. Listen to this.
You line up 100 CEOs in the country and say, is this the way you'd run your business if you wanted to make it more efficient and effective? Absolutely zero would say yes.
When you try to fix a broken company or agency or an entity or an organization that's bleeding cash, you've got to cut deeper. You have to cut way past the comfort zone, because you only want to do it once.
The Democrats appear to be using the same arguments that helped elect Trump in the first place. Have you heard any differently?
No, I don't think Democrats have yet learned, they haven't done any type of autopsy like Republicans did in 2012 after Obama won re-election. So they really don't have this is how we messed up, and this is how we're going to improve. As you know, Alan, they've called Trump a fascist for 10 years, and it hasn't worked. He's been elected twice, and he lost narrowly in 2020. At the same time, Democrats have to have a positive message. Honestly, I think they should pick out some parts of the Trump agenda, like cracking down on credit card companies that they agree with, and talk about them. Talk more about policy than name calling. Name calling, may work a little bit with the pundits and cable TV ratings, but as far as getting votes, I think just calling Trump name after name after name, that's not going to work.
Well, one of the big showdowns this year will be the budget and the looming tax increase. Most Republicans want to keep the current tax rates in place rather than let those rates expire. Most taxpayers would see their taxes increase. The House Speaker got past his first hurdle, getting initial approval from his party, but he still has his work cut out for him on getting the final approval. You think he'll really find a way to do that?
I think it's going to be very difficult, though. I have to give credit to Johnson for getting that budget resolution, but that's only the framework. Now they've got to do the underlying bill. The Senate wants to do it in 2 steps, where you'd have energy and border security first, and then you do another bill on tax cuts. The House is very different. They want to do them all at once. Honestly, because of the small margin in the House, Alan, I think it's going to be very difficult. I think the tax debate is going to go all the way to Christmas. Do I think that people's taxes will increase on January 1? No, but it's going to be kind of an ugly, plodding process, and they may need some Democratic votes. They may need to bring in Democrats. And remember, Democrats bashed the Bush tax cuts, but then they voted to extend them on more than one occasion. So that could happen. One way or the other, tax cuts are going to be extended, but the big question is, can Republicans do it alone? Because the way they're doing it now under this reconciliation process, where they only need 50 votes in the Senate, no Democrat's going to vote for that. So they've got to be united, and it's tough. It's tough unifying all Republican lawmakers in the House.
Well, Bob, I'm curious. You've been in the truthful news business for quite a while. Do you see any sign that the very left-leaning reporters and editors are giving Trump policies to the opportunity to help restore our nation, or are they just going to continue to trash them?
I don't think so. I mean, I think that the media's playing less gotcha than maybe 2017, but still, when, as Vice President Vance was asked 6 days into the Trump administration about inflation, I mean, that's a little ridiculous. It's a ridiculous question to ask 6 months in. Now, at some point, obviously, Trump owns the economy, but he just got in there. So by and large, I don't think the media is going to give credit. And listen, that's what the media should be fair referees. If you win, okay, you did a good job. If you didn't pass a big bill, then you deserve the criticism. But even when Trump passes something or gets something through, you hear a lot of criticism.
I saw the video of the cabinet meeting with that packed room, closing with a prayer and a comparison shot with the previous administration. That was quite a contrast. You think they can sustain that momentum?
I think so. I think that the cabinet, unlike Trump's cabinet in 2017, which he jettisoned several of them in that first year, is more unified. There's more loyalty now. I think that this cabinet respects the president more than his first-year cabinet. And also, Trump was getting his D.C. sea legs. He's a New York guy, but he had not known the rules of D.C., wasn't even familiar with pardon power. Now he knows everything, and that makes him more dangerous. Dangerous meaning in a way that he can get a lot done. And that's what Democrats are nervous about. That said, again, very small majorities. So Republicans have to unite, and Trump is the leader of the party, so it falls upon him, and he helped pass that budget resolution because he was on the phone working the phones. He's going to have to do a lot of that to extend his tax cuts.
It was a fascinating picture to me with all the talk about diversity and inclusion. That was a pretty diverse cabinet he's cobbled together.
Yeah, I mean, listen, he has Democrats. I mean, some presidents really only picked a token member of the other party, but you look at the Trump administration, obviously you have RFK Jr., Kennedy, and then you have Gabbard. And listen, I think maybe some more down the road because obviously he's going to be in office for 4 years. So as long as you're saying, I'm going to implement the Trump agenda, and RFK Jr. faced some tough questions on abortion because certainly at one point he was pro-choice, but he answered it deftly and said, listen, my boss is Trump, and I'm going to implement his agenda. And that's what Trump is looking for.
Well, Bob Cusack, it is great hearing from you again. Stay in touch, and we'll see you soon.
Will do. Thanks, Alan.
When we come back, some guidance on how to stay in front of all this change. It can be done. I believe we're in a season of shaking. The shaking may feel uncomfortable at the moment, but afterwards, things become visible that weren't so clear before. Well, there's a shaking happening in the way things are done in Washington, D.C. right now. And in my opinion, it's good news that this new administration is finding ways to eliminate excess waste in government. They're exposing fraud and abuse and finding ways to keep our taxpayer money from funding causes that are contradictory to our biblical worldview. It's good news that our borders are being secured, that illegal crossings are down tremendously over this last month. With these positive changes so clear, one would think that the legacy media would celebrate. Well, that's not the case. Much of the legacy media and politicians attack those who were duly elected. They also attack those who are helping to implement the ideas that Americans voted for. They attack those for finding and exposing the abuse and fraud that has run amok for decades. We shouldn't be surprised. One of the characteristics of the end of the age is deception. And we have to be vigilant so that deception doesn't destroy those we love and what we hold so precious. I'll remind you of a verse. It's Colossians 2 and verse 8. See to it that no one takes you captive through hollow and deceptive philosophy, which depends on human tradition and the elemental spiritual forces of this world rather than on Christ. One of the ways to avoid deception is to know the truth. I'm told when banks train their employees to recognize a counterfeit bill, they don't train them on every possible way counterfeit currency might look and feel. They teach them to be so familiar with the real thing that when you pick up a counterfeit bill, you'll immediately recognize the difference. Well, let's make that our goal regarding the truth of God. Let's become so familiar with His Word and the principles of His character that we'll immediately recognize anything else as hollow and deceptive. Let's pray that God will help us to recognize His love, His character, and yield to His truth. If we'll do that, I promise you there's more reasons for hope than despair. We'll be back with your emails in just a moment. Thank you for taking the time to send us your emails. Your thoughts and opinions are an important part of our show. Pat emailed, "We love the show and continue to learn. Thank you for going beyond the pulpit and into the political realm. The two are intertwined. That can't be denied. We look forward to every episode." Well, I appreciate the encouragement, Pat. I prefer to think that I'm in the cultural realm, trying to stay out of politics. I'm not running for anything, but I believe our faith has to intersect with our culture, or it's just a theoretical faith, and that's no good to anybody. Finally, Catherine emailed, "Thank you for your good ministries that help us understand the world we live in from a Judeo-Christian perspective. Please help us understand why the mass deportations of illegals is not against Christian values. I need to know how to think about these actions and how to respond to statements and questions addressed to me by people trying to either understand or undermine." It's an important question. I think the key is in the way it's been described, the reality of it. It's illegal immigration. And anything that begins with the label, the description of being illegal, shouldn't be encouraged. If we don't like the behavior and we think we want more of it, we should change the law so it can be done legally. If you make an illegal withdrawal from the bank, we don't care what needs you have, how desperate you may be for the money, you're still stealing. And if you're coming into our nation illegally, you're circumventing the legal immigration policy. You're stealing goods and services from the tax-paying citizens. You're putting yourself in the queue ahead of citizens for education, for health care, for job opportunities. Illegal is not good. This really isn't a confusing issue. It's not compassion to encourage people to behave in a way that's illegal. It's a good question. Make sure you send your emails to comments@alanjacksonnow.com. From all of us here in Nashville, thank you for joining us tonight. And I pray you have a wonderful evening.